any sunscreen out there that you're willing to apply will be, I'm just going to say, a half separated mineral sunscreen that every mom influencer tells you it's the safest thing in the world. Just saying.
God. All right, everybody, welcome back. This is the Chemist Confessions podcast, and I'm Victoria.
And I'm Gloria.
And this is a human conversation on all the skincare science we talk about on the daily. And we have officially hit summer. It's June. I can't even believe it.
I have my giant breezy shirt on because it's getting a little toasty.
Yeah. And so because of that, we have to talk about sunscreens. Gloria did a great deep dive in some of the updated sunscreen research that's out there. And this episode is going to be dedicated to all of that. It's going to cover things like sunscreen habits, SPF values, and even a coral reef update. So I think it'll be pretty interesting for everybody, I hope.
Yeah, we've talked about sunscreen so much on this podcast. For some of those classic studies, like the Sunbrella versus sunscreen study and some other fantastic ones, and old coral reef data, just head to some of our older links. But today, like Victoria said, we're going to go over things that we noticed came out in 2023 and 2024. Mm-hmm. So these are some fresh new papers, starting with a survey study on application habits.
Yeah, so this is actually pretty in-depth. They looked at product types, things like sprays and face lotions and body lotions. They even looked at the type of user, whether they're beachgoers versus just general use. And they just pulled them for a lot of behavior questions. And so I think just it's actually pretty in-depth, and you can definitely read the report for yourself. It is open access, but we are going to highlight some of the main takeaways here. A couple of them I find like, it's like, oh, I guess it's like mildly shocking in that it's still maybe this bad, but I guess like, you know, we can discuss. So the first one to start is they were looking at the beachgoer user, and they found that for beachgoer users, there's a line here that says there is a split on the application of sprays between no rub or applying directly to skin and letting it sit, which is 40% of them, or just rubbing it in 50% of them after applied directly to the skin. And I'm starting with this. It feels very specific, but it gives you an idea of the level of detail of the kind of questions that they have. And also the confusion that they want to point out in something like a spray sunscreen for beachgoers. And so I was like, oh yeah, so that confusion is still there. And Gloria and we should still talk about that, even though I feel like we talked about it for like 5 years now.
I think we've done a couple of demos, especially last year with the UV camera, which we're busting out again very soon. Yeah. Where we demoed that when you spray sunscreen directly on face, the sun application, the sun protection goes on in spray form. So you have dots, fine dots of sun protection, and then patches of exposed skin. So for the most part, we recommend rubbing it in. That's how you're going to get that even coverage. There are some sunscreen sprayers out there that kind of advertise like, ooh, it's a really fine mist. You can get that coverage without rubbing in. But even for those, like, it's so user dependent, we still recommend rubbing in. Yeah. This is also a question we still get a lot from, like, every summer, we still get people who ask us if they can directly spray sunscreen on. And I'll be honest, like, I totally understand the conveniency, and this totally makes sense for beachgoers because the point of you using a spray sunscreen in reapplication is so you don't have to rub sand around on your skin. But the reality is that you're not really getting that even coverage and can be kind of dangerous.
Right. And also know that the film, you want a uniform film to get proper protection, right? That's the main takeaway for any sunscreen format. So just keep that in mind as you dabble in all the different types out there. Here's another one where they actually look at face SPF. They have a line here that says, use of facial skincare SPF products is dependent on weather conditions, with only half, the sentence is quite weird. It says, with only half and a quarter of consumers using such products on partially cloudy or cloudy days, respectively.
Okay, so 50% of people will use it on a partially cloudy day, but then that drops all the way down to 25% on a very cloudy day.
Yes.
Interesting. Yeah. So we should mention that this survey was conducted on 2,000 some odd people. And these people are selected because they self-identify as sun protection consumers.
Yeah, good point.
also think that number must be atrocious when you apply it to the general public.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so I found that to be, I was like, I guess I understand, but you're still, the thought of like, I guess in my mind, I always think like, you're still getting some level of UV on a cloudy day. So it just seems like, I guess I didn't realize. So to me, it feels like 25% of people choosing to use sunscreen on a cloudy day. I was like, that feels really low.
It does. And I think it is because of, you guys, our listeners and our followers are already people who are really way above average in terms of self-care knowledge. So it almost feels like, we are constantly in contact with people who are the 25% in the study, who know that, daily SPF goes a long way in terms of protecting skin from premature photoaging, and it becomes a natural part of your daily routine. But this survey shows that the bulk majority of the people still think of sunscreen as still only use sunscreen only when there's a chance for a sunburn type of situation.
Yes. And so we're going to start sharing a few of the charts. They're quite in depth, and I think definitely pause on the charts and take your time to go through it. There's a summary chart on weather, and I thought it was kind of interesting where they talk about how for beach recreational SPF, I think those are products like Sunbum or like Copper Tone, right?
Yeah.
They show that 99% of those surveyed will use it during a sunny day. And then they talk about how like partly cloudy. What's interesting is they break down male, female, inland, and coastal. And weirdly enough, coastal people, slightly higher chance of applying applying sunscreen during partly cloudy and cloudy versus inland. So I was like, I guess that makes sense.
I guess that makes sense. If you grew up seeing the consequences of people who don't use sunscreen, you're like, maybe I should apply.
Exactly. We're going to move on to the next chart. The next chart is general SPF usage. Okay. So they're going to survey, same breakdown for male, female, inland, and coastal groups. Okay. They asked them, and I'm reading this to Gloria, see how she feels. Okay. Question 1. Do you ever layer more than one form of SPF on your face or body at the same time? 55%, this is for general survey, okay? 55% say no, I only use one type of SPF and don't layer different products.
Wait, only 55%? So 45% said they mix?
Exactly.
Wow.
So
that is so much higher than I thought.
Exactly. 36% say yes, I layer different forms of SPF on my face. And 18% says, yes, I layer different forms of SPF on my body.
What?
And I'm like,
wait, really?
Why?
Wait, so most people under apply sunscreen and don't even really remember to use sunscreen. You're telling me the people who do, close to half of them is like, you know what, better wear two to be safe.
I found this to be so surprising, and I was thinking maybe because like women, they sometimes wear foundation with SPF.
Yeah.
Maybe they apply an SPF over. Maybe that could be it. But they even mentioned I layer different forms on my body, and you've got like 22% of males say yes, 18% of females say yes. I'm like, that's actually really high.
I'm super surprised by the male one. So your theory about females, I think, makes sense. Like sometimes there is a tinted product that you might use as your daily foundation or like kind of like a prep step, but then you feel like, I should wear like a more robust SPF over or under or whatever. So that I understand. But in the survey, the male percentage is not that far off from the female. So I'm like, which dudes are layering more than one sunscreen?
Yeah. So that's really fascinating to me. Okay. And then they have a follow-up question. They say, when you layer different products containing SPF, do you do so to intentionally improve SPF? 63% of those that said yes say yes, that is the reason they do that, is to improve the SPF strength.
That's actually pretty surprising to me. Wow.
Yeah. So I was like, oh, wow. I guess there is definitely a huge mistrust in the SPF products they have.
Well, for this one, the females who say no, they're layering for reasons other than SPF is much higher than the male. And but that makes sense for the makeup theory. But for the dudes who are layering more than one, I'm still like, why?
I know. It's wild. I'm going to skip through to, I want to talk about this chart. They talk about the idea of reapplication. Okay. So now understand that how they break this down is actually by product. So they have 4 product categories. It's by beach sunscreens, SPF skincare, SPF cosmetic, and SPF lip product. Okay. So they say, what is the reapplication prompt? What is going to prompt them to reapply? 34% of those that use beach sunscreens will reapply upon noticing redness on skin and lips.
Too late. It's too late. No, it's too late.
Yeah. So that was like, oh, that hurts.
Yeah, literally. By the time erythema creeps up, the sun damage is there. It's done. And SPF is there to prevent sun damage. It's not going to reverse any of the damage you sustain. So once a redness sets in, yeah.
What's even more interesting is this is still for those that use beachwear sunscreen. Much higher chance if they get water exposure, 56% will reapply. They say 54% after a certain number of hours, but they didn't say like how many hours.
Okay. So time-based, but don't know what time.
Exactly. And then 51% said after sweating / being active. So you're more likely that if you're active and wearing sunscreen to reapply versus just lounging, I guess. I don't know.
Well, I think I'm okay. My big takeaway here is even though the numbers are a lot higher, I am a little concerned at how I still feel like it's low, especially for the ones that have been active, sweating, and in water, because those are all SPF killers, right?
Yeah.
And for water resistancy, I should backtrack a little bit. For those of you who are unaware, the general recommendation is reapply every 2 hours. And usually if you're doing stuff that involves sweating or any type of swimming water involved, there's a water resistancy rating, say up to 60 minutes or 80 minutes. Take those numbers pretty seriously because that's what they've been tested up to, and take it more seriously if you're by the ocean because they usually test it in fresh water, not salt water. So all those are factors that in our 30 for 30 test, sweat and water are big factors that can really, really deteriorate that sunscreen, and you're really going to want to reapply after. And I feel like this, even before I entered the cosmetic industry, that was something I thought they were already educating us on. Like if you go to the pool during the summer, when you come out and towel off, I typically reapply sunscreen even as a kid because I feel like that's what I was told that you're supposed to do. So I'm shocked that half of the people say they don't reapply after going water.
And also, I think to add to that is in the US, you can't get a sweat resistant claim, right? And any of you guys who have been loyal listeners to the podcast, we actually talk about how like some have tried to instrumentally evaluate that and have seen that they work in completely different ways, right? Water from the outside interacting with the film versus water underneath a film. Two very different things to sunscreen film. So that's like even more of a reason why like reapplication is really important. So yeah, just another reminder there. But okay, so those are some stats to share. I do want to share a couple gems on the conclusions that they come to. You'll like this, Gloria. One of them says, on average, respondents indicated that they do not apply sunscreen unless they plan to be outside for at least 3 hours. And I'm like, that's a long time. That's a really long time.
Last episode, we talked about our chemist confessions. And I will say, like, for me, sunscreen application, I do feel like I still skew on the under applying side, especially during our challenge when we were being very mindful of applying the right amount. Yeah. Also, my personal habit, it's still hard for me to like apply the right amount. But to me, hearing that like you don't apply sunscreen unless you're going outside for more than 3 hours, that I'm like, please do apply sunscreen. Maybe it's because Victoria and I live in very sunny parts of town.
Yes.
I just feel like getting baked in LA for like even 15 minutes, you can feel your youth jumping out the window.
Even driving in the car, like I feel like my hands feel sad just like sitting there holding the steering wheel. So
well, if any of you guys live in LA, you will know those ladies, typically Asian, they will wear the sleeves when they're driving. And sometimes the hat and with the sunglasses. And they look a little funny, but I have to say visionaries. Those people know how to skincare. Right.
Visionaries indeed. And then, of course, this makes sense. This is right along with it. The study data shows that basically the data said in the subject, the surveyors do not reapply sunscreen every 2 hours as recommended by authorities. And I remind you, these are people that do apply sunscreen. They acknowledge that they're sunscreeners. And then another highlight, perhaps one of the more important findings, was that 34% of respondents use redness as a signal for reapplication of sunscreen on themselves. And get this, 45% of parents used redness as a signal for reapplication on their children.
Well, I suppose that's one way to make your kid grow up is a couple sunburns. Yeah, definitely. I feel like kids is so hard, and I get applying sunscreen on your kid when they're running around is really hard.
Yes,
but please don't use redness as an indicator. When you remember, just slather some more on them.
Yes, exactly. And I think there's this one takeaway that I thought was really interesting. They say, based on the survey results, only 10% of respondents knew that sunscreen products are considered drugs in the US.
Oh.
And they kind of go into it and talk about how maybe if they understood that it was a drug, they would take it more seriously, and reapplication would, their application habits would be better,
I have to say, I don't think that's how it's going to go. I think it's too far gone. Sunscreen. Yeah. You're not going to all of a sudden convince people that it's a drug. And also, I don't think people have a strong understanding to OTC topicals in general, because I have heard people call retinol like OTC retinol, because they think that means, you don't need a prescription to get it. But the reality is OTC is a drug classification. So sunscreen, acne meds. People don't think of like salicylic acid as as meds either, but it's also OTC. So I don't think that's good. You're going to spend millions of dollars in advertising sunscreen as a drug, and it's going to go down the drain.
I think that's a good point. I agree with that. So anyways, that kicks off this whole episode. Hopefully sets a tone. I found it to be really interesting, and, I just think like despite... Clearly, we live in an echo chamber, Gloria, because I feel like there's so much more of an initiative now around sunscreen. There's so much more awareness. And yet here we are. It still feels like there's a lot to do.
Yeah, for sure. I remember last year, there was a video, was it Aveeno? Was it Aveeno? I think it's one of the Aveeno sunscreen that made me cry because it was so slippery. It just like, I couldn't rub it in. It just kept going and then wound up running into my eyes. We were recording a podcast episode that day, and I was crying the whole time because sunscreen keeps dripping my eye. And we posted the video, and one of the comments like, "Why don't you just apply less?" And that's what I was reminded of. Like, right? Don't. Yeah. So I guess sunscreen education, there's still a long way to go, but we're gonna step away from consumer behavior for a little bit. And the next paper, I'm surprised they did, and I'm so glad they did, and because we get questions on this a lot, and. The reality is both sunscreen and cleansers are so formula dependent. It's hard to have a hard takeaway. So in this small study, they surveyed 20 people, and they wanted to compare wash off efficacy between a regular water-based cleanser versus a cleansing oil. And they also compared it with just splashing your face with water. So let's take a look at the results.
Yeah. So it's a really fascinating paper. It's small, only 20 subjects. But basically what they did was they had subjects apply sunscreen, let it sit for 30 minutes, and then proceed to wash off the sunscreen. And they would use either water, the Neutrogena Deep Clean Foaming Cleanser, or a Maybelline New City Rescue Miracle Oil, which I don't think gets produced anymore. I couldn't find the IL on this one. And they would wash face for 2 minutes, which is much longer than how I wash my face, that's for sure.
Okay, so for those of you who have never timed yourself washing your face, we can assure you that 2 minutes feels like a lifetime. When we were testing our blank slate cleanser, we timed ourselves because when we were comparing wash off efficacy of makeup, I think at one point we set it to 1 minute, and the two of us are just like, towards the end, you're like, come on, man. But the takeaway here is, first of all, time does contribute to how thorough it cleanses. So longer it does clean better, but I guarantee you most of you are probably between 20 to 45 seconds. Even a minute feels very long.
Yes, I totally agree. And the other thing I thought was interesting is they mentioned that sunscreen was applied with a thickness of 1 milligram per centimeter squared. So they did not follow the general rule in sunscreen testing where it's 2 milligrams per centimeter square. So I did want to put that out there.
I find that really interesting because one of the lines in the paper, they said that they did this, that basically apply half of the testing amount to mimic what people usually do in real life.
It's very sad.
Yeah, most of you are probably applying half the amount, so yay.
And we're going to get into that in the next segment because that is a whole nother can of worms there. But anyways, so I should also mention that they are testing 2 different types of sunscreens, which I thought was great. They're going to test a non-water, they say waterproof, but it should be water resistant, a Innisfree UV Perfect Sunblock. And then they have the water resistant sunscreen that's Innisfree Eco Safety UV Perfect. So those are the 2 that they're testing. And we'll talk about the results.
Yeah, we'll put it up on the screen so you can take a look at it. For what it looks like, they use a Visia device. To kind of assess sunscreen residue, they just did imaging on it. So you'll see like the UV light pictures up top. Obviously, when there's no more sunscreen left on face, a negative where they never applied sunscreen in the first place, you can see the bare face versus a face that's completely covered in sunscreen. And looking at it, the first chart we are putting up there, this is the non-water resistant sunscreen. And it's probably not very surprising that it's not very different in the efficacy of a regular cleanser versus an oil cleanser. So we're going to go ahead and move on to the water resistant sunscreen, where the result, while not surprising, is still interesting to look at, that the oil cleanser worked a lot better than just a regular water-based cleanser. I do want to point out that, I'm sorry, Innisfree, this is not a great look. That water alone also took off about 40% of the sunscreen.
Yes. Yes, exactly. And so I think I also want to mention, I feel like, while it's a great study, it's something that's, I think so many people have asked us. I do think there's an aspect of like formula dependent because,
of course, yeah.
Like, I don't know if you remember this, Gloria. We did, of course you remember this, but we did the Visia study of our own testing Blank Slate with the Bior Aquarich, which is also water resistant as well. And we found that one was significant in its ability to like take it off as well. And I think we even tested cleansers like Cetaphil.
Yeah.
So just keep that in mind, but I do think I totally agree that for some of these like more heavy duty sunscreen films, you can feel it, especially with some of the tinted sunscreens. You definitely need a cleansing oil. There's no way.
Tinted is bad. There's some tinted where you feel like you wash your face and you swear to God, you're like, I still look a little orange.
Exactly. You're like, I'm pretty sure there's still a patch like right here.
Yeah. I think it's fascinating. And like Victoria mentioned, this is one study looking at 3 very specific formulas. So of course, this is all a case by case thing, but it's still a good takeaway that if you're using water resistant sunscreen, it's still a good idea to just double cleanse. And I do want to add that in the study, they let the sunscreen sit for 30 minutes. Usually as the day goes on, hopefully everyone's reapplying, but I think on 2 hour sunscreen wear does impact how well it washes off as well. Last year when we did the 30 for 30, we, for the most part, we did let sunscreen go through the full 2 hour life cycle, and or we took it to the gym on a sweat torture test. In those situations, the film is already on its way out or compromised, and we didn't have a lot of issues with washout for most of the sunscreens, minus maybe the tinted ones. So all those play impact, but at the end of the day, if there's any doubt whether or not you're cleansing well enough, double cleansing doesn't hurt.
Yeah, for sure. And on that note, we should take a break.
Are you in need of a ceramide fix? Check out our cult favorite slugging companion, Bon Voyage. This represents our chemist's blood, sweat, and tears, and a lot of dollar bills that just went into this one. Well, ultimately, we want to create the salve with a whole 1% of ceramides. It's a tiny but mighty tube that can be used for all your pesky dry patches, face, lips, elbow, wherever you need. So check out Bon Voyage and don't forget to use the promo code CCPodcast2024 for 15% off your first order.
All right, let's jump right back into it.
All right. Next, we have a really good one. I thought this was an old paper. I did double take when I saw the title. It is J&J is back with SPF50 versus 100. They also did the other 50 versus 100 study. The old one, what they did was they took it to a ski lodge and basically gave a bunch of skiers SPF 50 versus 100. Basically, the conclusion from the study was SPF 100 performed better than 50. And kind of what they're getting at is even though SPF 100 is misleading in that it doesn't actually protect you from 100% of the UV light, the difference between 50 and 100 is actually only just 1% of UVB. But because these formulas are so robust, and people tend to underapply. So when you formulate with a higher SPF, the end result is still better protection than a lower SPF, something like that. But then this time they're like, you know what? People don't seem convinced, so we're back again. This time they decided, you know what? We were cold in our first study. This time we want to go to the beach. So they went down to Florida with this one. So what they do in these studies is instead of telling people how much to apply, when to apply, they're like, all right, beach party, everyone. You have free reign over the SPF 50 bucket. You have free reign over the SPF 100 bucket. Basically, what they want to do is assess how people's natural behaviors and how that translates to protection. Yeah. And this is not super surprising, but then but the takeaway from this is when they measure pigment formation at the end of their beach day, the SPF 100 group had a lot less pigment that accumulated throughout the day.
Yeah. And I feel like J&J, they're just like, bring back SPF 100 claims. Like, we will dominate this, like I think
don't ban it.
Yeah, exactly. I think they were just like really pushing for this. And I honestly, it's like, while I understand and I guess I believe in their formulation prowess just because of the many, many, many dollars they've put into that.
Yeah.
I think it opens such a crazy can of worms because now you're basically saying that it's okay to under apply. And I also don't know if I completely trust every SPF 100 formula out there. Right. So unless you're willing to do clinical studies like this multiple times, I just don't know if like this is going to convince me that, oh, why don't I just get an SPF 100 and then I can use less and it won't feel so bad.
Yeah, 100%. I think Victoria and my stance on sunscreen is definitely just find the texture you're willing to really lather on. At the end of the day, that's the key, right? Yeah. Even if you go for SPF 30 or 40, applying the right amount of that is going to be a 100 that you're going to like try to smear the thinnest possible film over because it's so disgusting. Yeah. So that's still the key with sunscreen. And I think the J&J studies are interesting. Oh, sorry.
No. I wanted to stop you right there because that's the perfect transition because I just want to add a little blip I found. This is done by Neutrogena, okay? They actually calculate the SPF values you get when you significantly decrease the amount you apply. So remember how the previous paper with the cleanser, right? They're like, people typically only apply half. Right. All right, let me read you. I'm going to put the chart here for you guys, but for listeners, I'm actually going to read some of these values for you guys so you guys can understand. So for an SPF 30 lotion, if you apply only half the amount that you're supposed to, you only get an SPF 15. And then if you apply 25% of that amount, you get an SPF 9. Okay. Oof. For an SPF 50, you apply half, you get 26. And then SPF 50 for 0.5, you get 14. They did these measurements to show you guys, like, in a sense, like what kind of values you're working with here. Okay. Right. SPF 70 lotion, you get a 34, and then you get 25% is 19. So in a sense, it's like the math kind of checks out here in a way. Right. But I think to be able to measure that and show proof of concept, but also just to remind you guys, like, this is how much less SPF you're getting. I think really puts things into perspective for everyone. So that's why, with an SPF 100 lotion, they're saying if you only apply half, you still get an SPF 50, whereas 25%, you get an SPF of 27.8. Yeah, exactly.
I'm so glad they did this. And we should remind people that this is a Neutrogena study. Every sunscreen, when you under apply, it's not going to be linear per se. So it's still formula dependent. So for sunscreen, for some, if you under apply by a lot, then that might be worse than others. And I do want to mention, I guess like this isn't a good takeaway, but me looking at all of this, it's like, it just feels like sunscreen is now a realm where they're starting to look at more people's psychology on applying sunscreen.
Yes, that's such a good point. Yes.
And to me, that's like it's a big topic, and I don't think there's a good takeaway because I feel like if you dig too deep into this, then you're actually calling the whole SPF system kind of into question because if it never reflects what you're doing in real life, then what are we doing? But anyway, that's the general takeaway.
Yeah. So all that to say, just as Gloria was saying, the goal is to find the sunscreen you're willing to lather on. And if you do, hold on to that guy and don't let anyone tell you otherwise to change it.
Yeah, absolutely. Any sunscreen out there that you're willing to apply will be, I'm just going to say, a half separated mineral sunscreen that every mom influencer tells you it's the safest thing in the world.
Oh, God. And there are so many. It's so sad.
So I with our sunscreen challenge coming up, that is a one field I'm dreading so much is all the minerals and all the maybe separated minerals.
Yeah. And just a little sneak peek, Gloria will probably be testing a lot of the minerals just because minerals tend to be very drying. So that would be something that she can comment on. And then for me, I'll be going back to the tinteds because for some reason, everyone's like launching a tinted now. So
there's so many this season.
Yeah. Wild.
We'll see.
Yeah. Okay. Moving on. We're going to just take a couple minutes to talk about sunscreen labels for children. It's going to be so quick. Also because it's very unregulated.
Yeah. I know this is not what you guys want to hear, but it's the truth.
Yes. Sadly, it is the truth. There's not a lot of guidance on how to formulate actually any skincare for babies versus children versus adults. Okay, so I'm just going to read you a takeaway here, and I think it's something that can be helpful for anybody that has kids. Just maybe food for thought here. Okay, so sunscreen products marketed towards baby and babies tend to align closely with guidelines for sunscreen use in the pediatric population for children over 6 months of age. However, in this study, and the paper we're referencing, what they did was they kind of, it's another review paper where they're looking at a lot of product and product claims. Study demonstrated that sunscreen products marketed towards children and those engaged in sports showed a remarkable similarity in active ingredient compositions to the overall profile of regular sunscreens available on the market, without taking into consideration healthcare society's guidelines for sunscreen products in the pediatric population. So, the too long didn't read there. Need to buy an extra one. You might be able to just use
share
your own
one with your kid.
Yeah, exactly.
These are some of the studies we found that came out about sunscreen in the past year and a half. So I hope this is interesting. We are going to take a little quick break before we wrap up with the very juicy and kind of sad topic of coral reefs. So
and on that note, let's do the animal fun fact.
Yay! Hit me, Victoria. What are we talking about today?
Okay, today for your animal fun fact trivia, the fact to woo a lady. Today we are actually going to talk about ravens.
I love ravens. Those are fun.
Yeah. So they're a cousin of the very clever crow. Ravens are also very good problem solvers, and that's because they are not very good hunters. Okay, so instead they learn how to call wolves to the prey, leading them to the hunt, essentially. Yeah, and so once they see an opportunity, when the wolves are essentially eating the carcass, they'll sneak away a piece of the carcass for their own, and that's how they hunt. That's how they get their meal.
So smart. They're so smart. Oh, that's so awesome. I have a fascination with all the ravens, crows, like anything in that family. You guys can find a lot of cool videos on them. I always like the ones where they talk about how corvids can recognize people by face. And they will they're petty, so they will take revenge if you're not nice to them.
Exactly.
Definitely go check out Tower London, where they still have ravens living there. And
cool.
Yeah, you'll have a guy that talks about the history and talk about how basically they're there for good luck. And they're talking about how, like, was it 7 or 8 ravens that they keep on hand? They have 7 to guard the castle, and the 1 is a spare, something like that. But the ravens there are really fun, and they're all really well trained because they're super smart. So they will come on command and whatnot. It's fun.
As I was doing my research, Reddit sometimes is a great avenue to find interesting stories. I really like this line, Gloria, and I think you would like it. One of the Redditors wrote, in quotes, as if this is what the raven is calling to the wolves: "Hey, dog, big stupid dog, food's this way. Get over here. Tear this thing apart for me." And I was like, yeah, that's probably pretty accurate.
That is so smart.
And one more thing to add is that on top of that, they actually apparently do have like a symbiotic relationship with wolves. So they will actually adopt wolves and play with them as they grow. And they'll even follow the adopted wolf if it decides to leave the pack. So they have that companionship. And then the other thing that's really cool is they can serve as a security system for the wolves because not just ravens, but a lot of birds have learned to follow wolves for a free meal. So they act as the bodyguards basically fending off other birds because they're much bigger, actually. So they'll allow the wolves to hunt in, they say relative peace in quotes. So I thought that was pretty neat.
Oh, that's so smart. I had no idea. Good find, Victoria.
Yeah. Yay! All right. And with that, it's time to wrap this up. And we're going to wrap this up with reef safe sunscreen.
So we are ending on a peppy note.
Okay. All right. I'm going to be very honest, Gloria. After looking at all of this, I just don't think we've made a lot of progress here in this realm.
I have a confession, everyone.
Yes.
I found these papers. I put in a doc, and I'm like, Victoria, I don't want to read them. It looks depressing, so I punted it all to her to summarize.
I gotta be honest, like those the papers you found, and then I also tried to like look into regulation and all of that. I feel like there was so much hype. What was it in 2020 when this all came out? And then they unearthed it. They opened the can of worms, and then no one knew what to do with it, and it's now just floating there. Like no one. It's just there, and the general questions are still the same. You know, how can you create a testing environment that's going to mimic what's going on in the coral reef, right? Are we looking, you know, and I think the main update we can give you is that I think in the beginning, they were only looking at a couple chemical filters, right? But now that has expanded to pretty much every filter being looked at, including mineral. And I think that's the one that we should mention here. There is a paper that Gloria had pulled that actually looks at nano versions of mineral. And I think ultimately what they did was they looked at it for a very specific type of coral. They call it the button coral. It's very common though. And they use this to kind of assess the toxic effects and underlying mechanisms of physical sunscreens. And we want, I guess, our listeners to be aware of this because most minerals, in order to get no white cast or as minimal of a white cast as possible, is going to be nano. Yeah. And so that's why it's a lot more prevalent than you might feel it is. It's just not necessarily claimed or shared. And no one's going to share that, to be honest, except for EU where there's some certain guidelines around that. But long story short, so after exposing this button coral to both zinc and titanium dioxide, zinc oxide and titanium dioxide, they found that the coral was restored. The inhibited individual corals could be largely recovered after a short 3-day exposure time, just 3 days. However, longer exposure time damage to coral, they call us irretrievably, which revealed the latent environmental risk of physical sunscreens. So again, there's still a lot of questions, right? We don't know what the proper concentration is to mimic the environment, right? We don't know what, there's a lot of variables here, but just know that, you know, everyone is giving chemicals a lot of flack, but minerals are now also being called into question as well. And I think that's honestly the best update we could give you right now.
Yeah, and I think it's just a little awkward all around. And
exactly.
So when we did the coral deep dive episode a couple years ago now, the takeaway there is, sadly, coral have to deal with a lot more than sunscreen. You know, we can only ask all of you to find out and respect local laws regarding sunscreen, even though, you know, the reality is sunscreen is probably a relatively minimal factor in terms of damaging coral. Global warming, agricultural runoff, industrial activities, those are all really big impacts. And sadly, the studies, a lot of funding on cosmetics, even though it's only one of the many factors that coral reefs have to deal with, and probably a pretty minimal one. But it just, this kind of study makes you question, like, is anything truly coral safe? But are any of the tests actually showing anything for us? So it's still a developing situation, and we are going to get a lot more studies before we get any true conclusions. So sorry guys. This is about as great as it goes. And also keep in mind that reef safe is not a regulated claim. It's a very popular claim still, but you know, so if you want to learn more, definitely ask the brands of your sunscreens to understand more about that. But all in all, just know that this is still a very, like Gloria said, a very gray topic that it doesn't seem like a lot of even the experts know what to do with at this point. But all in all, we should sum up everything that we just shared. And I think before we do that, Gloria, I feel like our listeners are way above average on the sunscreen game. For sure. So I even feel like
our takeaways here are probably things that most of our listeners are already doing. But to start with application, the general takeaway is, don't forget to reapply. Don't use skin redness as an indicator to reapply. Follow the guideline, 2 hours. Follow that. I think lately what we've noticed is there's a lot of sunscreen brands out there that are starting to say things like last a really long time, last more than 2 hours, last 6 hours, kind of weird things like that. That's really not kosher because remember, sunscreens are a drug. They are regulated. They must follow the guideline that it must be in increments of 2 hours. And that's how the monograph is used to do the testing. That's and so because of that, we must follow that time indicator. And yeah, don't do that. Don't follow that.
And the other half of that is if you've been in water, if you're by the beach, you dunk yourself in the ocean, if you've been sweating a lot, definitely reapply. Follow the water resistance time as a solid guideline. But the reality is, based on our test, if you're sweating profusely, that sweat coming up from under the sunscreen film can definitely compromise it, especially when you couple with wiping away the sweat. Yeah. So definitely reapply more frequently than 2 hours if you're, taking a long hike or something like that. Yeah,
exactly. In terms of cleansing, if you don't use a water-resistant sunscreen, your cleansing habits should be just fine for for the sunscreen you're using. If you're using water-resistant, and we will add any heavily tinted sunscreens, we highly recommend a cleansing oil just to be safe. And then to follow up, I think the main takeaway is try to use a sunscreen that you're going to lather on and not play into this, this general assumption that these scientists are making that we're under applying all the time.
Yeah. More is more here, 100%. And we've stressed time and time again, we know this is really difficult, but a sunscreen that you're willing to use and use a lot of and reapply in that SPF 30 to 50 window is the perfect amount for your daily sunscreen wear.
Yeah. And then finally, if you have kids, just know that, if you want to be more mindful of the sunscreens you're applying on your children, shop baby. But also know that texture is probably not going to be very fun and your kid might not like it.
Look like a clown. So this kind of concludes some of the latest science that we looked into about sunscreens. Let us know if you have any other burning sunscreen questions. We are about to kick off our sunscreen 30 for 30 test on Instagram, so keep an eye out for that. Yay. And I think that's it. Yeah. Where can I find us, Victoria? Sorry.
Yeah, so you can find us on Instagram at chemist.confessions. You can find a lot of long-form content and guides on our website, chemistconfessions.com. You can email us your burning questions at info@chemistconfessions.com. We are also on TikTok at Chemist Confessions, but please do not DM us there. Otherwise, thank you guys so much for listening. We hope you guys like this episode, and we will see you guys soon. Bye, guys.
Bye, guys. Bye.